Black History Month, and since tomorrow is also the first day of Women's History Month, I thought it was appropriate to end the month with this badass babe, Dr. Alice McCain. Dr. Alice Whitby McCain was born in Bridgewater, Pennsylvania in 1865. Despite her parents dying suddenly when she was 7 and losing her vision for 3 years, she excelled in school and eventually graduated from the Women's Medical College of Pennsylvania. That's when she moved to work at the Haynes Normal and Industrial Institute in Augusta, Georgia, becoming the state's first female black doctor. While she was in Augusta, she would meet and marry Dr. Cornelius McCain. The two would get married and they would move to Savannah together. The move made Dr. Alice McCain Savannah's first female doctor. She and her husband would open the McCain Training School for Nurses, which would eventually be renamed Charity Hospital. In 1909, she and her husband moved to Boston, where she continued her medical career, published 2 books, advocated for women's suffrage, and was a member of the NAACP. Let's talk about an important woman in the founding of Savannah, Georgia, Mary Musgrove. Mary was born to a Creek mother and an English father near what would become Columbus, Georgia. After she grew up, she married John Musgrove and operated a trading post on the Savannah River. When General Oglethorpe showed up to establish Savannah, Mary acted as interpreter between him and Tomochichi, the leader of the Yamacraw. She continued to work as a mediator between Native Americans and colonists and was even given 3 islands by Chief Malatichi as thanks. Even though the English government never allowed her to take control of 2 of the 3 islands, they eventually agreed that she owned St. Catherine's Island, which is where she ended up living the rest of her life. Juliette Gordon Low, the founder of the American Girl Scouts, was born in Savannah on Halloween in 1860. She grew up in this home on Oglethorpe Avenue, where her parents encouraged her love of athletics, the arts, animals, and nature. Juliette lost her hearing in one ear at 25 and in the other shortly after her marriage. When she was 26, she married William Low, who had grown up in this nearby home. The two would spend most of their marriage in England. In 1901, the couple separated, but William died before the divorce was finalized. While in the UK, Juliette helped establish the Girl Guides to offer an alternative to the Boy Scout. In March of 1912, she would organize the first 2 troops of what would become the Girl Scouts in Savannah, Georgia. She held troop meetings in the carriage house behind her father-in-law's Savannah home that she inherited. She continued her work with the Girl Scouts until her death in 1927 at the age of 66. Today, countless current and former Girl Scouts flock to Savannah to see where Juliette made history. While Juliette Gordon Low may have grown up in this home, it's the Andrew Low home on Lafayette Square where her ghost has been spotted. The founder of the American Girl Scouts died from breast cancer in the home, and some claim to have seen her ghostly resemblance resting in one of the upstairs bedrooms. But Juliette isn't alone. The ghosts of Andrew Low and even Robert E. Lee also supposedly roam these halls. I've told you how Juliette Gordon Low, founder of the American Girl Scouts, was a total bamf. But today I want to tell you about her equally awesome mom, Nellie. Nellie was born in Chicago in 1835. She married William Washington Gordon Jr. in 1857 and moved to Savannah, Georgia. She wrote several books, but it was her actions during the Spanish-American War that earned her a great deal of respect. When she saw the troops under her husband were receiving terrible medical care, she started a hospital and followed them all the way to Puerto Rico. In 1883, when a monument to her father-in-law disturbed the burial place for Tomochichi, Nellie arranged for a granite boulder to be placed in the square with a plaque so no one would forget the Yamacraw leader. Nellie died at the ripe old age of 81 and is buried with her family in Laurel Grove Cemetery North in Savannah. We've established that Nellie Gordon was a spitfire in life, but even the story of the day she died is pretty epic. Nellie was on her deathbed after a long and astounding life. As she took her final breath, people in other parts of the home swear they saw the ghost of her husband walk into the house and up the stairs to escort his wife to heaven. Death may have separated them for a few years, but it also reunited them. You may have visited the Telfair museums on your trip to Savannah, but the woman behind them did so much more. Mary Telfair was the daughter of a Georgia governor. She was highly educated and tenacious. Instead of getting married like many women of her time, she chose to stay single. She was independently wealthy. The freedom that gave her meant she could pursue more learning, appreciation for art, and traveling in Europe. When she died in 1875, her will stipulated the creation of 2 things: the Mary Telfair Women's Hospital near Forsyth Park, and entrusting her home and art collection to the Georgia Historical Society. That home would become the Telfair Academy you can visit today. But just because Mary Telfair isn't physically here anymore doesn't mean she still isn't felt. Her ghost story is in part 2. Mary Telfair may be gone, but her spirit is still felt around the museum she once called home. She's very particular about what happens inside. There's a legend that when someone tried to move her portrait, a portion of the rotunda's ceiling collapsed. Staff members have also reported the sound of phantom footsteps and seen a shadowy woman disappear into empty rooms. But my favorite ghost story involves food. Mary doesn't want anyone eating or drinking in her old home. Once, when the museum moved a fundraiser inside due to weather, Mary's angry spirit blew through the home, shattering windows. Any indoor fundraisers are now held in newer parts of the museum. One of Savannah's prolific poets is a woman named Gerald Sieg. Gerald was born in Savannah in 1909, the daughter of a laundry owner. Her father often recited Chinese poems to his children and fostered a love of poetry in Gerald. Many of her poems talk about the experience of Chinese immigrants in America. Her poetry was published by the Poetry Society of Georgia, and her stories were published by the New York Times, Washington Post, and Savannah Morning News. Gerald died in 2005 and is buried in Bonaventure Cemetery, but her poetry still resonates. Happy birthday to Flannery OConnor. Flannery was born in Savannah in 1925 and moved with her family to Milledgeville in 1938. As a young woman, she pursued a degree in journalism while also publishing poetry, displaying the razor-sharp wit that would become her trademark. When she realized journalism wasn't her passion, she threw herself fully into creative writing. Her writing has been called Southern Gothic, but it really defies classification. In 1950, she was diagnosed with lupus, which would keep her mostly at home in Milledgeville. She kept writing, though, and would go on to publish 2 novels and 3 collections of short stories before her death in 1964. Today, you can visit her childhood home in Savannah. During normal years, there would be a parade through the square to celebrate her birthday. But since this isn't a normal year, enjoy a book from the Flannery OConnor book trail, and remember, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you odd. Before Women's History Month ends, I need to tell you about Eleanor Sandy West. Sandy's family moved to Ossabaw Island near Savannah, Georgia in 1924. She inherited the island in 1960 and turned it into a retreat for artists, writers, and scientists. When she was 65, she sold the island to the state of Georgia so it would become a heritage preserve and not another development. Sandy continued to live on Ossabaw Island until she was 103 when she moved to an assisted living facility in Savannah. Sandy died this past January at 108 years of age. Her family remembers her as a woman who protected an island and always found love for people and animals.